It could be argued that Ubisoft over the last 5 to 7 years has ran the reputation of its company into the fucking ground. And I think that anyone who said that would be being kind on Ubisoft, probably. Anywhere I go on the internet that's outside of the hardcore Assassin's Creed fanbase kind of just shits on Ubisoft for all the anti-consumer and mediocre things that they have been doing. And I'm not here to defend any of it because I find myself agreeing. I often call myself an Assassin's Creed fan, not a Ubisoft fan, because outside of the Assassin's Creed franchise, I don't really have an interest in many of the games that they release, and I don't really have an interest in defending anything they do, not that I think anyone should. However, I did want to basically explore how much good faith or leeway or margin of error Assassin's Creed as a franchise has given a company like Ubisoft, because under any reasonable other circumstance, a company like Ubisoft would probably be under or have been sold by now, because it keeps failing under the eyes of investors, it keeps failing under the eyes of fans, and for the most part, it doesn't do anything really well outside of Assassin's Creed. If it wasn't for Assassin's Creed, its flagship franchise, I don't think Ubisoft would have survived past 2020. That being said, there's something really interesting about the legend that is Assassin's Creed as a franchise. It still remains competitive today in the overall market, and there's probably a million reasons why, but I want to explore the single reason that I think has remained alive throughout 15, 16 years that it has been in existence. Because there were some reasons back then as to why it was successful that don't exist now, and there are some reasons now as to why it's successful that didn't exist then. But there is one specific reason, in my humble opinion, as a biased fan, that makes Assassin's Creed continuously successful, and that is that there is nothing else like it. Whenever people try and move on from Assassin's Creed, find another game that replaces it, they usually just come crawling back miserably to the same old Assassin's Creed games that they just have become addicted to, regardless of how much they would like this to change or that to improve or this to be added. And it's because there's no other game that offers the experience and the fantasy that Assassin's Creed does. And I don't understand why, particularly, because it seems like there is a huge audience for it, like there's a huge market for these kinds of games, and it seems like there's a huge opportunity for another company to do it better. Now, at this point in the video, you're probably thinking, well, there is someone who did it better, and that is Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker Punch made a game that was basically a better Assassin's Creed. They made the best Assassin's Creed that anyone has released in years, and it was set in feudal Japan, so it's probably going to be better than AC Shadows. And to that I say yes, but there is something to be said about how it's not exactly the same, particularly when it comes to things that even Ubisoft can't seem to recreate right now. The stealth in Ghost of Tsushima is great, the story is amazing and better than most things Ubisoft could ever dream up, and the combat is definitely better than anything that Ubisoft has come up with. However, it doesn't really tie it together with incredible open world design and, more importantly, parkour. The movement system in Ghost of Tsushima is kind of very, not generic, but achievable for a video game. And achievable is the key word because it then bleeds into what Assassin's Creed, in my opinion, has achieved 15 years ago that no one else has achieved since, which is a incredibly accurate and advanced and intricate third-person parkour system. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't really have this in the same capacity that perhaps Assassin's Creed 1 even had it. Ghost of Tsushima allows you to climb things and jump. There's manual jumps, there's some zip lines, there's some grapple hooks, and there's some other interesting mechanics that allow you to have some intricacy in the movement. But it still leagues away from what the Ezio trilogy or Assassin's Creed Unity could offer when it comes to movement. Being able to pair stealth and combat with the movement is what I think makes Assassin's Creed unforgettable when it comes to mechanics. And doing so while looking amazing in a historically recreated, deep and accurate city, wearing a hood and a cloak and looking like a badass, feeling like a historical Batman, is the stylistic thing that makes Assassin's Creed so unique and irreplaceable. When you join those two things together, I think you have the answer as to why Assassin's Creed was successful then and why it's still successful now. I'm not saying it's the only reason. I'm not saying even perhaps that it's the biggest reason. I think that depends on the particular individual. But what I will say is that whenever I try and find a different game that fulfills that fantasy, the thing that annoys me the most is that no game has the parkour system or the movement system that Assassin's Creed has. The predictive jumping, which is a technical term basically just for how well Assassin's Creed can predict where you're going to jump and why, is something that I've not seen any other game replicate, and if you have, I'd love to try and play it, but I don't think that anyone else has done that. The ability to climb any architectural structure, the ability to side eject and catch ledge and kind of feel like a ninja or like a modern day or at least modern industry Prince of Persia is something that is truly irreplaceable. And until another game replicates the stylistic fantasy mixed with the mechanical fantasy that Assassin's Creed provides, I don't think that it has any real competition for the fans that are obsessed with that feeling. I saw a video the other day by a game developer called Tim Kane, and he spoke about something called a core gameplay loop, which a lot of you probably know what it is, a lot of you probably don't. But this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest issues with the gaming industry. One of the reasons why I think Assassin's Creed is still competitive in the video game industry. A core gameplay loop basically refers to the actions or the gameplay loops that you're going to be engaging with the most throughout a gameplay experience. experience. So it's basically, what are the main mechanics that you're going to be as a player using the most in any set game? And usually people say, okay, it's going to be shooting, it's going to be combat, it's going to be dialogue, it's going to be a million other things depending on the game that you're making. But the real answer is movement, which I don't know why most people haven't cracked yet. But what you're going to be doing most in games, especially when there's an incentive to elongate the games and make them as big as possible and make you go from one side of the map to the other just to start a quest, to expand and inflate player session times, the movement is basically where you're going to be engaging with the most. And movement is usually the most underdeveloped and undercooked mechanic in any sort of game. And that was true for the longest time until Assassin's Creed came along and built upon what Prince of Persia had done. Prince of Persia was basically famous for its movement system and its parkour, and Assassin's Creed took that and added so many more layers to make it even more engaging and put it in an open world setting. And to this day, I haven't found a single game or heard of a single game that can do what Assassin's Creed did. Most of the climbing mechanics or parkour mechanics in any other game are usually scripted, are usually put in some sort of level where you cannot really engage with these mechanics in any way you can, in any way you want, but rather through a scripted or pre-planned way, which is not a problem. Again, Uncharted does this, and God of War does this, and The Last of Us does this, and obviously Ghost of Tsushima does have some climbing and some jumping and a bunch of things like that, but they're usually very contextual and doesn't give you the freedom of expression and freedom of use that Assassin's Creed managed to do 15 years ago. No one has really done it since. And again, if you disagree with me and you think that there's a game that does offer this while offering stealth, while offering combat in this open world environment, in this environment where you cannot always predict how a player is going to approach something, but there's a mechanic to deal with that, I'd love to play it. Because right now, this is the reason why I and so many of us keep coming back to Assassin's Creed, because there's just nothing quite like it. There's nothing like a game that allows you to put on a hood and a coat with amazing cloth physics in this beautiful environment with amazing graphics and start running around however you want and tackling missions however you want. And just as a side note, I think that this bleeds into why it's a disservice to call Assassin's Creed a stealth game and why it's a disservice to stealth games to call Assassin's Creed a stealth game. It does a disservice to both, because stealth games are much more intricate with better AI and more interesting mechanics and much more tense scenarios than Assassin's Creed usually allows for. And that's why a lot of stealth game fans don't really consider Assassin's Creed a real stealth game. And that's why I think that Assassin's Creed isn't properly summarized by being called a stealth game. Because even though stealth is a huge part of it, what makes it so fun is the way it's coupled with parkour. The way that you can approach a target not just through a tight corridor or through climbing through a vent or any other like traditional mechanic that you have in Metal Gear Solid or Origami, but it allows you to approach any mission or any target through any way you want. The closest thing that I think Assassin's Creed has as a competitor is Ghost of Tsushima, and I think that will satisfy fans who are looking for great combat and a historical fantasy, for fans who are looking for good stealth and intricate character moments, or maybe even a beautifully designed world. But I don't think that it poses any sort of real threat for fans who are looking for an intricate movement system that pairs well with all of the above mentioned mechanics and features. Until someone cracks that code, until someone provides a new fantasy that ticks that box of this historical or alternate kind of Batman assassin type of character, I don't think that Assassin's Creed is going to have any real competition. And I hope that it happens because it might incentivize Ubisoft to actually make good decisions. Another thing that I think makes Assassin's Creed unique is the way that it recreates worlds and the way that each game provides its own fantasy. One of the fantasies that I find most addictive is Assassin's Creed Unity. So if you want to watch a video where I explain why I can't move on from that game and why there's nothing like AC Unity, you can watch this video now.